Today, we're covering two cases making headlines. First, I'll tell you about the murder of 71-year-old David Brimmer, who was targeted because he was a registered sex offender. Then I'll cover the triple murder of 3 young women in Argentina, who were killed to send a deadly message, and it was all live streamed. Let's get into it.
Court documents reveal the alleged killer told police he tracked down and stabbed the victim to death because that man was a registered sex offender.
Police say last Thursday, a 29-year-old suspect showed up outside the 71-year-old man's home on Solstice Court.
He also told officers that he went on the Megan's Law website and selected his victim because he was an old guy and he thought he would be easier to kill.
Hi, I'm Katie Ring, and this is Crime House Daily, your weekday true crime companion. We follow the cases making headlines now, where justice is still unfolding. This is a First Watch episode bringing you today's biggest crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Crime House Daily so you never miss an episode. This episode discusses active criminal cases and breaking news. The information we share is based on what's publicly available at the time of recording and may change as new evidence comes to light. We aim to inform, not to decide guilt or innocence, so everyone mentioned is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Before we get into our main cases today, I wanted to bring attention to a case that I saw online. In New Jersey, authorities are actively investigating the homicide of 34-year-old Christina Burdette, who was found unresponsive at a residence in Atlantic City on October 11th. At the scene, her body displayed visible bruises, and oddly enough, there was gauze wrapped around her head, leading investigators and her family to believe there was a struggle. The autopsy officially ruled it homicide, but no suspects have been named. Christina leaves behind 2 small children, ages 3 and 6, whose father passed away several years ago. Authorities are urging anyone with information of potential suspects to contact the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office as they seek justice for the young mother. As always, make sure to tune in to our socials at Crimehouse 24/7 for any possible leads or updates. For today's case, we're getting into the alleged crimes of 29-year-old Varun Suresh. On September 18th, 2025, Suresh was arrested in Fremont, California after stabbing 71-year-old David Brimmer to death. Suresh has been charged with murder, burglary, and causing great bodily injury while armed, and says he regrets nothing. He thinks David Brimmer deserved to die because he was a known sex offender. It turns out, though, that Varun Suresh has a violent past of his own. Let's get into it. Around 11:15 a.m. on September 18th, 2025, 29-year-old Varun Suresh of Fremont, California, is scrolling through the listing on California's Megan's Law website. Megan's Law authorizes designated law enforcement entities to notify the public when necessary to ensure the public's safety based on information available to the entity concerning that person's current risk of sexual or violent reoffense. There is a website associated with Megan's Law that lists identifying information, charges, and addresses of sex offenders. The law is named after Megan Kinka, a New Jersey girl who was just 7 years old when she was assaulted and murdered by a known child molester. The man had moved in across the street from Megan's family, and they had no idea about his record. And after Megan's tragic death, the law was passed to stop something like this from ever happening again. I highly recommend everyone, especially anyone who has kids, to look at the website to see if there are any offenders in your area. It is a valuable resource for women to protect themselves and families to protect their kids. But that's not how Varun is using it. He's using it to hunt down victims of his own. 32 years ago, when David was 39 years old, he was a pastor at the Jubilee Christian Center. With 6,000 members, it was the largest church in San Jose, California. Back then, David lived with a roommate, 28-year-old Pablo Geraldo, who was a youth minister at Jubilee. And in late 1992, the authorities discovered that the 2 men had been sexually assaulting children they knew from church, all between the ages of 9 and 15. David and Pablo had been preying on them for years, starting in 1989, and even briefly continuing into 1993, a few months after they were indicted. Pablo is charged with 8 felony counts of child molestation and pleaded guilty. David was charged with 15 counts and pleaded not guilty, which meant he was going to trial. In the courtroom, several of the boys testified that David took advantage of them during sleepovers at his home. And on February 8, 1995, David was found guilty on all charges. He ended up serving 9 years in prison. When he got out, he had to register himself in accordance with Megan's Law. And 2 decades later, he becomes a target himself. According to reports, Varun Suresh has been wanting to kill a sex offender for a long time. He thinks they deserve to die for hurting kids and is eager to do the deed himself. At 71 years old, David Brimmer looks like an easy target and lives nearby in Fremont. But Varun thinks that David might be paranoid about getting attacked and will be watching the street. So Varun creates an elaborate ruse to disguise his actions. Within minutes of finding David's profile, he grabs an office bag, a notebook, and a cup of coffee. Then Varun heads to David's neighborhood known as Upper Bittner Circle. It's a nice area full of large, stately homes, nestled at the base of rolling hills. When he gets there, he starts going up to David's neighbors' houses. He tells him he's a tax accountant and he's looking for new clients. To cover his tracks, Varun visits multiple houses on the same block before he arrives at David Brimmer's doorstep. Varun knocks on David's door, and when he opens up, Varun immediately recognizes him from his photo on the Megan's Law website. Varun does his best to seem non-threatening. He introduces himself and pretends to be selling tax services. The two men make some polite small talk until, out of nowhere, Varun attacks. On September 18, 2025, Varun Suresh decides to kill 71-year-old registered sex offender David Brimmer. After posing as a tax accountant, Varun lures David into a false sense of security before he strikes. Varun drops everything in his hands, grabs David, and tries to force his way inside the home. But David fights him off and takes off running down the street. Varun chases after him, and while he's running, he pulls out a knife. As Varun catches up to David, he shouts after him, asking him if he believes in God. Then Varun tells David to say his final words. But David keeps charging ahead. Eventually, about 2 blocks away from his home, he spots a house with a garage door open. He runs inside and pounds on the door, yelling for help. A terrified neighbor comes to the door, and David begs him to call 911. Then Varun catches up, and he tells the resident that David is, quote, the crazy one. David isn't waiting for the neighbor to decide what to do. He pushes past him and runs into the house. He tries to slam the door shut, but Varun is too quick. He forces his way in, then begins chasing David through the house. Eventually, he corners him in the kitchen, and David has nowhere else to run. Varun lunges at David and stabs him in the neck. He tells David it's over and that he has to repent. In that moment, Varun gets distracted when the resident of the house yells for him to stop, and David gets away. David runs out of the house through the front door, and Varun chases after him again. David only makes it to the front lawn before he collapses from blood loss. Varun kneels over him, then continues stabbing him. Somehow, David manages to roll onto his stomach in another effort to escape. But Varun stops him and delivers a final fatal slash to the neck. First responders are already on their way after receiving multiple alerts. The earliest calls came just 45 minutes after Varun took screenshots of David's registry. When the police arrive, they find David unresponsive on the ground. They try to resuscitate him, but there's nothing they can do, and David is pronounced dead at the scene. Meanwhile, Varun is standing right there. He never even tried to flee. He admits to the killing and is arrested on the spot. When police question Varun, he says something that seems to counter his earlier methods of disguising himself as a door-to-door salesman. He says he never expected to get away with the murder, and that he actually wanted to be arrested. He tells officers he would have called them himself if no one else did. And he doesn't stop there. Varun says that he doesn't regret what he did because David was a sex offender. Not only that, Varun says he had fun. He also admits that out of all the registered sex offenders he considered killing, David seemed like the easiest because of his age. Varun didn't expect him to fight back as much as he did. Meanwhile, news sources quickly pick up the story. They also uncover some shady events from Varun's past, which seem to highlight his deep-seated vigilante mentality. 4 years earlier in 2021, Varun was charged with making a false bomb threat, criminal threats, and burglary after he left a suspicious bag at a Hyatt Place hotel. He did this just one night after police shot a suspect in another unrelated incident. So there was already heightened fear and police activity in the area. After he was arrested, Varun told the police that he had been hunting the CEO of Hyatt Hotels for a while because he believed he was a pedophile. With his past activities in mind, Varun is denied bail and held at the Santa Rita jail without bond, where he currently remains as of this recording. He's facing multiple charges, including murder, burglary, and causing great bodily injury while armed. His next court date is on November 20th for a plea hearing. Varun will also be undergoing a psychiatric evaluation. Although I will never mourn the death of a pedo, and it makes me sick to my stomach that our justice system only gave this man 9 years after raping so many children over the span of so many years, I think we need to make a collective effort to push for widespread reform so we can punish these monsters at scale, instead of randomly finding one of them on Megan's list and murdering them. I truly hope we can make progress towards this goal, but for now, we'll keep you updated as those results are made public and new facts roll in as this case goes to court. Our second case today is a disturbing and brutal triple homicide out of Argentina. On Wednesday, September 24th, 2025, the dismembered remains of 2 young women and a teenage girl were found in a backyard garden about 16 miles south of Buenos Aires. The garden was located behind a home that has since been dubbed the House of Horrors. 9 people have since been arrested, including one of the region's most prolific gang leaders and drug traffickers. With an extensive investigation underway, it's not clear when the next legal proceedings will take place, and many Argentine citizens fear justice will never be served. To understand why, let's unpack some of the socioeconomic climate in the area and how 2 young women and 1 teenage girl got caught up in the unforgiving and deadly world. Cousins 20-year-old Brenda del Castillo, 20-year-old Morena Verdi, and their friend 15-year-old Laura Gutierrez spend a lot of time together in the La Matanza area of Buenos Aires. And unfortunately, this is not a safe place for them to grow up. La Matanza is known to be dangerous with high poverty and crime rates. For years, activists and church workers have spoken out against federal policies that have led to these conditions. And with the economic downturn comes an increase in organized crime. With nowhere else to turn, a lot of people feel like the only way to survive is to join a gang. By September 2025, locals are extremely worried about the lack of safe space for young people to hang out. Kids, teens, and young adults brush elbows with street gangs every day. That includes Brenda, Morena, and Laura. One of the gangs they frequently run into is a multinational drug trafficking gang. In Buenos Aires, the group is led by 20-year-old Tony Hansan Valverde Victoriano, who goes by the alias Pequeño Jota, or Little J. Unfortunately, like many people their age, Brenda, Morena, and Lara are used to being around these gangs. So when one of the members approaches them on the evening of September 19th, it's not anything unusual. The girls are out in La Matanza around 9:30 p.m. when someone pulls up next to them in a white pickup truck. The person in the truck says they're throwing what's described as a sex party that night and offers the girls $300 to attend. The girls agree and climb into the truck, which heads to another suburb known as Florencia Varela, about an hour's drive from La Matanza. But when they get to the house where the party is supposedly taking place, Brenda, Morena, and Lara quickly realize they've been tricked. and there's no escaping what's about to happen. On September 19th, 2025, Brenda Del Castillo, Morena Verdi, and Laura Gutierrez are driven to a house 1 hour away from their homes. They're offered money to attend what they've been told is a sex party, but the men who brought them there have something horrifying in mind. Around 11 p.m., someone begins filming a live stream on social media to a closed group of about 45 people. For the next hour, Brenda, Morena, and Laura are brutally tortured and murdered, all while an audience watches via the live stream. As of this recording, those 45 people have not been publicly identified, but it's possible they're being coerced or otherwise forced to watch. Because at some point, Tony, aka Little J, either appears on camera to speak or writes a message to the group. He says, quote, "This is what happens to anyone who steals drugs from me." One of the girls had allegedly stolen cocaine from someone in Tony's gang. Now he's punishing them and sending a warning to others. Afterward, the girls' remains are wrapped in plastic and buried in the backyard of the house. When they don't return home the next day, their families become worried. Soon, police in Buenos Aires are beginning to search for them. They obtain the 3 girls' cell phone location data, as well as traffic camera footage from the night they disappeared. These clues lead authorities straight to the house where it all happened. On Wednesday, September 24th, 5 days since their disappearance, officers swarm the backyard and begin digging. Soon, they discover all 3 sets of remains. The victims were so badly tortured, their loved ones are only able to identify them by their clothes and some tattoos. On the day the girls' bodies are found, police find the white pickup truck they were transported in, burned and abandoned just 300 feet from the house. And that's not all they find. Inside the house are 4 people who investigators believe were all present for the murders. The first one is Celeste Magala Gonzalez Huerero, who is the main resident of the house. Celeste's partner, Miguel Villanueva Silva, Danielle Ibarra, who was cleaning bloodstains when the officers arrive, and Maximiliano Parra, who is helping Daniela clean. All 4 suspects are arrested and indicted on first-degree murder charges, plus other charges that haven't been specified. The Argentinian authorities know that these 4 people aren't the only ones responsible, especially since Tony was present during the live stream, but none of the current suspects will talk. Meanwhile, the story gains traction in the media. The scene of the crime is dubbed the House of Horrors, and the murders are labeled femicides, which are killings that target women or girls because of their gender, which brings even more attention to the story. By September 27th, as the public awaits further arrests, protests begin to erupt all over the country. Many people feel that the brutal tragedy could have and should have been prevented, were it not for recent federal cuts to gender violence policies. Brenda's father attends one of these protests and gives a speech calling for women to receive stronger legal protections. And I agree with him because femicide is becoming a worldwide problem and rates are increasing rapidly. Perhaps because of all the public outcry, police put more pressure on the suspects they already have in custody. And at some point, one of them breaks. This person tells investigators about the live stream that was hosted during the murders. Soon, authorities track down the footage, which helps him make 5 more arrests over the next 3 days. Lazaro Victor Sodocuro is suspected of being the one who picked up Brenda, Morena, and Lara in the white pickup truck. He fled to Bolivia after the murders before he was located and arrested on September 26th. The next day, 29-year-old Ariel Jimenez is arrested during a series of raids in Florencio Varela, the neighborhood where the House of Horrors is located. Investigators believe he dug the holes where the victims' bodies were buried. On Monday, September 29th, Lazaro's niece, 30-year-old Florencia Ibanez, is given an interview at a local TV station when officers arrive and take her into custody. CCTV footage showed Florencia in the truck with her uncle on the night of the murders. but she denies being involved. On September 30th, Argentine police work with authorities in Peru to locate the last 2 suspects who they believe fled to the country. Tony's right-hand man, 23-year-old Matias Agustin Osorio, is soon arrested. And finally, hours later, 20-year-old Tony Hansen Valverde Victoriano is arrested as well. Both men are extradited back to Argentina. Now, all 9 suspects are facing murder charges. And investigators are still working to find out whether others were involved. Authorities are also speaking with social media companies to try and figure out where exactly the live stream was hosted. Many sources have said it took place on Instagram, but Meta, Instagram's parent company, says they haven't found any proof of that. So far, investigators only know that the account that posted the live stream was private. In the meantime, Brenda, Morena, and Lara were laid to rest on September 27th. Their loved ones described the lack of closure they still feel and lamented the fact that they had to keep the girls' caskets closed. But the danger isn't over. Some of the girls' families have received death threats, which is putting a lot of pressure on the police to complete the investigation before something else terrible happens. As of this recording, the authorities haven't announced any next steps, but we'll be keeping a close eye on this case, and we'll bring you all of the major updates. What did you think of today's cases? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments. See you next time. If you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Crime House Daily and follow us on social media at Crime House 24/7 for real-time updates, because the pursuit of justice never stops.